The following video will demonstrate using the dice, tokens, zones, paths, and instruction commands in the Pawn Age editor to create a simple roll and move board game. We begin with an empty project in the Pawn Age editor. First, we need to load the board image into Pawn Age, so I click the image tool, browse to our image, click open, and click apply. The image is now in Pawn Age, ready to be used. We're going to create a die to use in our game. So now we're going to click the new dice dialog. We're going to name a new dice. We're going to call it main dice. It's going to be a 6-sided die. Click apply. Next, we're going to need to make the token. We click the new token tool. We will name this the player token. Actually, this is going to be more of a classic pawn style. We'll call it the player pawn. Maybe just a classic pawn. And the size for this is going to need to be a size 40. Click apply, and then click the X. So for a quick overview, we have the image to use as the board loaded in, we have a 6-sided die, and we have a player pawn, which means our next step is going to be to start to set up the layout of the board. Click on new layout, we have to give it a name, we'll call this one board. Then under the image section, we'll grab the board that we loaded in earlier, tell it to use image size. This sets the dimensions of your layout. Click apply. Now we're going to add containers to the board to specify where our dice and pawns exist. For that we click containers and then add. To start we need a place to put the die, so we'll call this container dice space, and its dimension needs to be 100 by 100. We'll put it at the location like XY coordinates 200, 200. Which we'll save when we close it. We'll create a place for the pawn on the board. We'll call it start. Give it a dimension of 100 by 100, and it's good at 25, 25. You can see our two squares. Those are our containers. We've got them on the board. So now we need to go to placement. Put the pawn and dice in. Go to placement. Click on board. This is the board we made earlier in the board layout section. The containers aren't showing up, so well, something must happen. Oh, right. Back in, forgot to apply on the layout. There we go. Now back to placement. Now we see the containers. There they are. So now in our placements tab, we're going to go to the player pawn, grab it, drag it into the start box, go to the die tab, do the same with the dice. And hold on to your hats as we zip through making all the zones for the pawns to move around the board. Next, we want to link up these containers. For that, we're going to use paths. So we're going to add path, click the arrow. This dialog asks us where we want to start the path, so we'll start in the start and go to step 1 is our end position. The line appears here. See that line, that's our path, so quick fast forward, set up our path around the board. Next we're going to get turn order in place, which will be a new sequence. And we're going to call this sequence the main sequence. To this main sequence we want to add an instruction. This sequence we start by rolling dice, so on player roll dice wants to be the instruction. Not just any player rolling dice, but the player whose turn it currently is. They will be rolling any dice. That's correct. Finish. Next instruction we want is that any player, the player will reposition a piece along a path. Player whose turn it currently is, reposition any piece we want. We do in fact want token as a piece, so we can set up any of his tokens along the path with the tag, the path we made earlier, which is called path, we want the number on the dice. So we can go here and set the number, value on dice, value on any dice, finish, and that says move the player pawn along the path based on what's on the dice. Click apply. Now we're ready to set up our game flow. For that we go to game settings. In our game settings we're going to use the initial sequence as the main sequence from earlier, turn sequence, everyone will follow the main sequence. Looks good. Click X. Time to test this little bad boy. Alright, so as we move here. Die shows 2, we move 2, roll the die. Ready to move again. Things are good so far. We can go up and go 4, which is here. Click and move. This has been Tim Wu demonstrating and Lance Bailey narrating a demonstration of making a game in Pawn Age. For more information, visit our website at www.pawnage.net.